Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stars and Stripes Soccer. It's going to be a lot to be unpacked today due to U.S. Youth National Team announcing their U20 and U23 rosters this week. So that'll be the main focus of today's episode with some news on a few of the players on those rosters. So, U.S. Soccer released the U23, or the other name is the Olympic team, this recent Wednesday. And yesterday they released what they're calling the U19 roster, but this will be the U20 team for this upcoming CONCACAF championship. So beginning with the U19 slash U20 roster. This will be the final camp before they have the CONCACAF U20 championship. That will begin on July 18th. There'll be two games for this camp. One against Argentina, another one against Uruguay. The match against Argentina is on June 7th, and the Uruguay game is on June 11th. Both of these games will be away matches for the U.S. in Buenos Aires and Montevideo. Trying to pronounce it the Spanish way, and still trying to learn it. So some of the notable admissions from this camp is Diego Koken, Cole Campbell, Noah Kai Banks, Obed Vargas, Reed Baker Whiting, Rodrigo Neri, and for myself, who I think is an admission, is Grayson DeToni. So for the reasons behind these players not being there, Barca's B team, Barca Athletic, they're having a match coming up, an important match for their promotion. So that may be the reason why Diego Koken is not there. A similar situation for Cole Campbell. They have a Dortmund has a U19 match coming up. They want him there. It's apparently a championship game that's important for their campaign. Haven't seen anything so far on why Noah Kai is not there, and that is the same for Rodrigo Neri. Still waiting to find out on that one and why he wasn't called up. As for Obed Vargas and Reed Baker Whiting, it's being reported by someone from the Seattle circle that they had declined the call up. Obed Vargas, his makes sense because of the fact due to the injuries, he's been getting a lot of minutes with Seattle. And he probably wants to try and retain that spot, but it's also he's guaranteed to get some minutes. It's honestly better for him to play for Seattle than it is to play in these two friendlies. But if he gets called up for the U20 championship, I think he needs to be there. It's going to probably be a bit more beneficial for his international career to also have that underneath his belt. As for Reed Baker Whiting, that one is kind of a head scratcher on why he would decline it, because he's really not been getting a whole lot of minutes. I mean, combined between Tacoma and Seattle is around 100 minutes that he has played. He hasn't really done anything for him, so I don't know if he thinks that he's going to try to slide in this month to the first team a little bit more for Seattle. I don't know, but he should have been in his camp. He would have been able to play, help his resume, and so on. And it probably would have been better for him to be here than being in Seattle / Tacoma and not really even playing. On the stuff with the DeToni, he is doing that for us between Italy, and he's highly rated within Bayern. He's 19 years old, and he's playing for Bayern too. knowing that he's been training with the first team for a while. And with Bayern too, he's been one of their main center backs for most of this season and has been important to the team. So I'm not sure what it is. We haven't seen him in a couple of years with the U.S. This thing on the top of my head, but he needs to be in consideration, especially when the U.S. decided to call up Noah Cobb. I don't know why would you call up Noah Cobb, but you wouldn't call up um, Tony. And this from conversations I had with a source is not looking too great with our standing with Tony. And I imagine if Italy comes knocking, they might take it up on the offer because he wants to play international, and for some reason we're just not giving him that opportunity. But going over who all got called up for our keepers, we have Boudry, Julian Eyestone, and Gavin Beavers. All those I'm happy with. They all have either done well for their club, like Beavers, or have done well for the national team so far. And Eyestone, as I mentioned in the previous episode, he's heading to Brentford, and with North Texas, he's done well for them. On defense, we have Akimboni, Noah Cobb, Stuart Hawkins, Drew Murray, Luca Babino, Aiden Harangue, Ethan Kohler, and Nolan Norris. I don't know why we're calling up Nolan Norris. The times I've seen him play within U19, he hasn't done very well. I know Dallas fans, there's some mixed reactions from some of the people I talked to on him, but I don't know why we're even calling him up when he hasn't really done anything for us. I know one Dallas fan told me is the coach for Dallas is honestly hurting Nolan Norris, and that may be the case, but he's not performing for the national team. He hasn't really done anything for Dallas, so I don't know why he's called up. I do like seeing Murray and Kohler back, and I imagine Kohler's probably going to play right back again. And if you watch him in the last camp back in March for the U19/20 team, he did very good. It was usually he plays as a 6, but for his club in Germany, which one is it? For the Bremen, he has been playing as a 6 or center back, but he does have the skills to play as a right back, kind of similar to how Kimmich can play both as a 6 and a right back. Same case like Lam, how he is a 6, but he was capable of playing right back. And with the fullback pull that we have at that age, it's great to have him there, at least. Again, Boney is one that we need to try and recruit. I do like seeing Hawkins back because compared to some of the other center backs that we've had so far this season and the MLS Next Pro, he's been one of the better ones, more consistent players. Even Taylor Hall for Miami, Hawkins, in my opinion, has looked better. I watched a few of their games, both of them, and he just looks better. But I imagine he probably got called up because this roster kind of seems like they're doing a little bit of rotation, which I don't know why they're doing it. A rotational roster right before a tournament, to me, you should try and bring the guys you know that would be there and into this camp to try and help with the integration and try and keep that cohesion. And those you couldn't bring in, like Diego Coca and Cole Campbell, yes, then you need to bring someone else in. And then Murray, he was another one that did a very good job in the last camp for the U19 team. He has played at times for Freiburg, so their U team. But imagine eventually he'll probably be playing for their B team a little bit more next season. Part of it was because of age. He can't really do much. He didn't turn 18 until late last year. And Bobino, I'm not sure why. Um, Especially when you have some of the other fullbacks. I think that probably would have been a better option. For midfield, we have Taha Habrun, Sergio Arrigo Jr., Paulo Rusol, Nico, Pedro Soma, Brooklyn Reigns, Cruz Medina. Um, I really don't know why we're bringing in Sergio again because he hasn't really done anything for Chicago's second team. And if you watch him in that last camp, might as well have been saying that we were playing a man down because he was one of the worst players. And I think there's plenty of other options than him. I'll get more into that later. But honestly, it's good to see Soma and Taha, and they're more likely going to be our main players in the midfield. And Rudisol is good that he was able to get the release from Fine to come into this camp. Cruz Medina, I know people who follow a little bit more on MLS Next Pro and some of the people I communicate with. He hasn't really done much. I know he has been producing a little bit for San Jose's second team, which they call the Town. But compared to some of the other ones, I think that would have been better looked at. One example is CJ Olney. Uh, he's been a lot better this season. So and I know it has probably to do a lot with the fact that he is Mexican American. He was just in a youth L tree camp, and it is probably one of those things where they're trying to retain him just to make sure that they have him and that Mexico doesn't win him over. So who knows? For forwards, we have Bershimas, Christian Fletcher, David Vasquez, Marcos Sobrano, Xavier Gozo, and Keirol Figueroa. It's great to see Figueroa back. He had been injured a couple times this past season, so he has lost a lot of time. So that's part of the reason why he wasn't in the Marsh camp. Gozo, he is highly rated. I know that. He did score an Open Cup game against New Mexico, but he has been inconsistent. So, and he is one of the younger players on this roster. If for some reason Neri could have come into the camp, if that was a possibility, I don't know why you're not bringing Neri ahead of Gozo or even Marcos Sobrano. I know a lot of people have Sobrano ahead Neri, but he didn't cut it out in Benfica, and just looking at what I could find on him with his current club in Portugal, he hasn't really gotten much of an opportunity either. And I think Neri would have been better in the last camp if he had better partnership, but that Marsh camp was a little bit of a debacle anyways because a lot of players were playing opposition. We were playing a formation that wasn't very ideal, especially when it was against Morocco. And I know Berchamas is highly rated. He is a very good player. He did have a very good U17 World Cup campaign. But when you look at him in MLS X Pro compared to some others on the wing at the same level who are a little bit older, I don't know why he's being called in because he hasn't been very impressive. Because I watched a couple of his games with Crown Legacy. I do have a lot of high hopes, especially when the fact that he is talking about going to Bayern. I know there's some people said there's a little bit of an agreement somewhere there. I'm not completely sure, but I am a little biased because he is in communication on Bayern. I don't know if he is ready for the U20. He may need to stick with the U17, maybe play with the U18. Fletcher and Vasquez, I know I'm not going to talk too much about that because I know that a lot of people rate him. I do rate Fletcher, but he hasn't really delivered for DC United when you compare him to a couple others around his age, like Ismir, who has performed well, has contributed to goals for New England, and a New England team that's one of the worst in MLS this season. So, uh, if Ismir wasn't in the U23 camp, I would say that you need to put him ahead of Fletcher. But that could be one reason why Berchemass isn't in this camp. So just looking at other little opinions I have on this stuff. Going back to the Sergio business, again, to me, there's better options that they could have brought in. I already mentioned CJ Oni, who in 8 matches with Philly 2, he has 2 goals and 2 assists, and has been one of their better players this season. Even when you look at him last season, he had really stepped up his game. And talking to someone who is a big Philly fan who really follows Philly too, they believe that he should be in this camp as well, especially when you kind of look at some of the other players in here. And another one I could think of is Nate Worth. I understand that Worth had a lot of problems trying to get minutes underneath the new manager of Tulsa, and it's part of the reason why that is the main reason why he went to Tampa Bay. But since he had moved to Tampa Bay, they have been putting him on the pitch as a sub, and he's done fairly well. But people can argue that MLSX Pro is better than USL simply because of the fact that it is part of MLS is obviously going to be better than USL, but who eliminate most of the MLS Next Pro teams? The only one that really even made a deep run in MLS Next Pro is New York City FC 2. I think Nate Worth has a higher ceiling than Sergio, and even right now, I think he is a better player, and he happens to be younger too. But I don't know if it has to do with age or the hype behind Sergio in Chicago, or if it's because of the fact that he's doing that. I don't know, but I'm not. If I see Sergio in a CONCACAF U20 championship, I am going to really question the effort that's being put in for this championship / qualification for the World Cup. There another player I could think of is Kai Cabin. I get that he has never been with the team. He only been recently discovered when I put out a tweet about him that he was eligible for US. But when you look at where he's playing in Spain, he's playing for a feeder club to Valencia. Valencia is heavily monitoring him. He does play mainly for their U19, but he has played for his club's U23 team and has goal contributions for the U23 team for his club. But he's done very well at their U19 team, and so much so that he is getting attention for several other clubs. He is a dual nat. He's eligible for Puerto Rico, and people can say what they will about the youth level of Spain, but Spain is one of the best national teams in the world, and partially it's because of the development at the youth level. So, compared to Sergio, maybe a couple others, when you look at what Kai is doing, U.S. soccer needs to look at the kid and needs to take him in consideration for this group. At this point, he probably won't. If he ever is get looked at by U.S. Soccer, he won't be at the championship. It's probably too soon, but they need to look at him before next year's U20 championship. Um, but I mentioned those who I do like and those who I don't like. Um, but a couple other points or uh, this I have mixed feelings about this camp just because who didn't make it. And I understand some of that has to do with the clubs. Um, but uh, players that got included, I just don't understand why at this point. Um, and it does make me believe that when it comes to the U.S. youth national team, U.S. soccer is basing their selection based on the hype that the player has and the potential that the player has more than the way how they're actually performing at their club. Because CJ only hasn't even been looked at, and I can't even. I don't even know he's even been looked at. I can't, on top of my head. But uh, when he's outperforming some of the players on this camp, and it's simply because these players have more hype. Because like Cruz Medina, for example, he has more hype than Oni, but it doesn't warrant the fact that because of the hype, we should call up these players, or we see a lot of potential in these players. I mean, it's the same situation with Kate Cow. That kid has so much hype. He's continuously getting called up, and he's also on the U23 camp. It's all because of the hype. Uh, and that's what we should not do at the youth level. The youth level, we need to also look at how the kids performing and what they're doing at their club level. Like Tony, how he is training with the first team at Bayern. I mean, one of the best clubs in the world. And he's being looked over by other players who are not even at close to that level. Um, so it's the same reason why Noel Buck decided to leave the U.S. pursuit to go for England because he last season he was doing very well for his age, like arguably the best at his age. Those who are playing MLS, and he was getting 0 call ups. And it was because before last season he really didn't have much of a hype going on compared to others, but he was getting passed up by players that he was outperforming. And all we're going to do is probably create more opportunity, more players like Noel Buck who are just going to say, you know what, you're not going to give me opportunities because I'm outperforming someone that has more hype. I'm just going to go for the other team. We're going to lose dual nets, in my opinion, by doing that. But I digress on that because I still got to cover the U23 team. So for the U23 team, they decided to call up 25 players. This will also be the final camp before the Olympics. So quickly try and go over all the players that got called up. For the goalkeepers, we have Patrick Schulte, Gaga Salina. Defense is Nathan Harrow, Jalen Neal, Brian Reynolds, John Tolkien, Jonathan Tompkinson, Caleb Wiley, Walker Zinneman. Midfield is Cole Bassett, Gianluca Busio, Benja Kermashi, Jack McGlynn, Aidan Morris, Rokas Pukštas. I believe it's Pukštas. I watch a lot of hockey too. Latvians, when there's S at the end, it's like is like SH. And I think Lithuania's kind of do the same thing. Tanner Tessmann. And then lastly, for the fours are Paxton Harrison, Ismir, Taylor Booth, Kate Cal, Damien Downs, John Gomez, Notre Gomez, Duncan McGuire, Kevin Paredes, and Griffin Yao. So far they only have one match, and that's against Japan on June 11th. I would like to hope that there is another game that just haven't announced yet or still working out. I don't like the idea of only having one match just before the Olympics, especially when you decide to call up 25 players. But briefly going over the Olympic rules because they're very strange compared to other youth soccer tournaments. There are 2 keepers, whereas in other competitions it's 3. They only want 2. 15 of the players had to be under the age of 23, and there must be 3 overage players. So that brings us 18. There's only 18 players on these rosters, but there are 4 alternate players, bringing it to 22. Those alternate players can only play if there's a mercy, like injury or a player had to leave early from the tournament, whatever. They're basically at reserve, but they cannot play unless one of the original 18 players has to leave or gets injured. So in this camp, the only overage player that's in here is Zimmerman. And based on what's being said by Marco and Berhalter, Zimmerman is going to go to the Olympics. He's going to be like the main center back, one of the main overage players. So that will leave 2 more overage players. With that being the case, 2 of these U23 players on this roster won't make the final cut. And that still puts us at 23. So there had to be 1 more U23 player that would be eliminated to bring it down to 22 players. Now, Marko Mitrovic said that this is not the final roster and that there are still other players underneath consideration. But I'll go a little bit more details on that in a moment. Some of the notable omissions from this is Brian Gutierrez, Max Ditz, George Campbell, Diego Luna, and Jonathan Gomez. So on really quick on Jogo is that his club has another match on June 2nd. That's their final match. My co-host, through one of his sources, has said that U.S. Soccer is trying to recruit him still for this competition. They're constantly calling him up. They really want him there. There's a lot of positives. It's not on U.S. Soccer. It's on the club. They're the one who is rejecting it because his La Liga 2 team isn't doing very well. They've been having to fight to avoid relegation for the longest time now. And he is their main left back. So he is critical to the team. At this point, I believe they are out of the danger zone, but probably just to make sure that there isn't any hiccups. They want him there for the June 2nd game. But even if he doesn't make it to the Olympics, it's not going to change his decision. From our understanding, he is on the U.S. side. He wants to play for the U.S. That's something that I have mentioned before, especially when some of his closest friends like Joshua Weiner, who are within the U.S. soccer circle, that's going to have some type of influence. And I know a lot of the El Tri fans have said that he will play for Mexico. He'll play for Mexico. I mean, maybe he will, but from our understanding is that he is leaning towards U.S. But and a positive thing is if he doesn't make it to the Olympics, he'll be able to do preseason with Real Sociedad, his parent club. They will not be having a left back as of right now for next season, and kind of rumor mill is that he is going to be looked at to be on the Real Sociedad, and they have been very pleased with his season so far. So there are some positives to take away. Also, and some people have said that the reason why Diego Luna is not here is because Mitrovic does not rate him. But in the press with an interview, Mitrovic said that Luna and others are still in consideration. But I mean, that could be all talk as well. And with Guti, who knows what the deal is with that? It's not going to look good for us losing him. I would really like to have him. I do rate him, but when you compare the other attacking mids to him, he's not very high up there right now. But this is simply based on performance, not potential or anything. It's just current form. Uh, but um, I am kind of feel like that this if he doesn't ultimately make it on the team, he will probably go for Mesco. Mesco probably will hop on that train as soon as he doesn't get the call for the Olympics, and that probably be how they will recruit him. Um, as for Ditz, he's injured according to his club, so that's probably why he's not there. But I imagine he's still highly in consideration for the Olympics. Um, and to me, the reason why I say George Campbell is a noticeable admission is because he's been in several of the U23 camps so far. And even though he may not be like a stellar center back so far for MLS this season, to those who follow it heavily more than I do, uh, but he has done very well for the U23 camp, along with Max. I think those two have done very well with it uh, together. Um, so even if we had those two as the main duo in the Olympics, I don't think it's an issue. But obviously are better options than Campbell and even Max like Jalen Neal. Um, but it is what it is for those guys. Um, my favorite addition is Damian Downs. Uh, he was killing it for Cole's second team, and he is very well rated there in Cologne. And I mentioned before, they just got relegated to this 5 Bundesliga, so he may be getting a lot more opportunities for them next season. He did bag 2 goals just coming off the bench for Cologne this season. And this is one that I've been wanting to see with the U23 team. And I know some people said that he may not make the final cut. He probably doesn't, but compared to a couple others in consideration for the striker position, he's a better option in my opinion. I'm hoping that he make the final cut. Um, and I'm very happy to see Taylor Booth and Yao back. Yao was by far, in my opinion, our best player in the last U23 camp. Um, and I'll briefly touch more on that here in a second, but I want to talk about Booth. Ever since Booth came back from injury, like I mentioned in the previous episode, he's been starting for Utrecht and has been doing well for Utrecht. And I know some people were speculating that he may not make it into the final cut, that he may not be in this camp. But those who were able to watch the closed door Mexico game a few months ago, they were saying that Booth was our best player, and I imagine they want to use Booth as like one of the main players for this Olympics and with this group. Especially when you kind of compare him to a lot of these other players, he probably is way up there to actually make it into the A team. We also have Pukštas in this group, and he's going to be one I'll be mentioning later on some of the recent news on him. But it's going to be great to see what he does. I do think that he will be in consideration for the Olympics. He's way up there, but with how constraining the roster is and the fact that you must have only 15 U23 players, it's going to be tough. But I imagine with how much hype he has, that they might just put him in there just because of that. On Paxton, I don't like the idea that he's listed as a forward because that just tells me that they're going to put him as a wing player. And that's not what he played at Vitesse. And even with his parent club, Eintracht Frankfurt, they play him centrally. He sometimes plays 8, but he's a 10. And this is another example why I have a hard time with U.S. soccer is the fact that they're playing players out of their primary position, and for some reason they want to say the Harrison brothers are wing players, but they're not. I mean, when you watch them, they play better centrally, and especially Paxton. Um, I'm hoping Paxton will play as a 10, though. And anyone who follows me on Twitter knows I don't like Kikau. I don't rate him very highly. And I know that doesn't bode well for many MLS fans, because I've had numerous occasions people bash me for not rating him very highly. But I mean, if you look at him at Chivas, you even realize that he's a fraud. These past 2 seasons, across all competitions, he's only had 5 goals and 2 assists. And 2 of those goals happen to be against a Canadian Premier League team called Forge FC. And the last time that Chivas even started him was back on April 6th against Puebla. I mean, he hasn't been getting a whole lot of minutes, and when he's only had 1 goal and 1 assist in league play. I mean, they know that he's not good at all. And this is another example of, like I mentioned earlier, why are we calling players up like him who can't perform for their clubs? We shouldn't be calling up players like him who are not performing for their clubs. What type of precedent are we doing that? I mean, it's the same thing with where we were calling up Brandon Anderson for months when he wasn't performing for Leeds or for Union Berlin. It says it's bad standard because these are players who want to play for their national team. And if you tell them it doesn't matter how bad you play for your club team, we're still going to call you up. It's going to place some type of impact into their mindset when they go on the pitch for the club. But at some point, we just need to let go of Cal, because the rate that part of the reason why he went to Chivas was in his clause, a European release clause, where if a team in Europe calls, he can go if he wants to go. Part of the reason why he went there is so he can get to Europe. And the way how he performed this season, he's not going to go to Europe. There's a lot of money that could be betted on that the fact that he will not be going there. Going right back to Yao in the last camp back in against France in Guinea. He had 2 assists in the first game, and he had a goal against France. And France is in our group. They're going to be the toughest team in our group. He's had a very good season for Westerlo, and that's part of the reason why they invited him in the previous camp. And he must have done enough to impress Marco. I know there's some people that I've talked to that were worried that it may, even though he did well, it may not be enough just because of the fact that before the season, people just did not rate him because of how bad he was in MLS. But he's really stepped it up, and he does deserve a second look, and that's basically what he's been given by Marcos, a second look. And then again, that is something I've noticed with U.S. soccer, is that they don't. When a player fails, it is hard for them to give another opportunity to some of these players. I mean, look how long it is taking Johnny to have a second look after what happened at very first camp he was in for the Olympic qualification. Even still to this day, he's still struggling to get people's approval, even the trust of Berhalter. But I need to move on because of the time. Going back to the roster, is that Berhalter had recently said in an interview that Joe Skelly, Gio, and Malik Tillman are in consideration for the Olympics. And there has been some rumors that Ricardo Pepi would be there too, simply because of the fact that he did a Photoshop for the Olympics, specifically the U.S. Olympics. If that's the case, it's going to really change a lot of things on this roster. You're going to drop a lot of players who haven't had a lot of opportunities so far for the national team. Um, and it also makes it very difficult to predict this roster until there's like confirmed reports or interviews by Berhalter or others from U.S. Soccer saying that they will be there. Along with that is besides Zimmerman, there had been a recent report that Miles Robinson is heavily in consideration. If you have Miles Robinson and and Walker Zimmerman, we're not going to do very well, especially against France. I don't know what's the fascination with these mediocre players, and I know some people are going to get upset about the fact that I call Miles Robinson mediocre, but he is. Um, uh, I don't think he should be called ahead of Austin Trusty. If you're going to call in Walker Zimmerman for it, you need to bring in Austin Trusty, but he is apparently as well in consideration. The other two are Alex Sendejas and Brendan Vasquez. Yeah, Sendejas had a very, very good season for Club America, but when you look at some of the other player options for this tournament, in the positions that he plays in the midfield and the wing, um, I to me it doesn't matter. Play have Taylor Booth or whoever else play instead. Um, and Vasquez, I I wouldn't be all that upset because he did have a good Cold Cup in my opinion. Um, and with his big body, I think he can really bully around the defense for these teams. But if it was between him, Dallas, and McGuire, I'm going to take Dallas and McGuire. So to briefly mention these the Olympics is that the Olympics will start on July 26th, but the football games will begin July 24th. So they're going to start the soccer 2 days prior to the Olympics. But you also have it where it's going to end on August 10th when the Olympics ends on August 11th. And that's important to note because if, say, the U.S. was to make it to the Copa America final, it will only give those three players I mentioned, or if Miles happens to make it on the final list for the Copa America, those four players, not only 9 days to integrate with the team and get ready for Paris 2024. I don't know how good of an idea that is. I would like to win a medal, particularly gold. And yes, Gio, Malik, and Scally are a lot better than a lot of the other players in their positions in this roster. But I don't know how good of an idea it would be because you're only going to increase the chance of their injuries, of an injury from them. And my most concern will be Gio on injuries. When there won't be a whole lot of time between the end of the Olympics to when the European season begins. But it's also because, as I mentioned, it will take away opportunities from those who still need to prove themselves, like Griffin Yao. I think that he's someone that would really benefit from it because if he kills it at the Olympics, it's going to help him get to a better club in Europe, and it will also help him get more recognition from U.S. soccer. So, um, moving on from the rosters, quickly going over some other things on some news on some players who are or have been in these past two camps. Tessmann is being reportedly targeted by Torino and Bologna And apparently, the technical director of Bologna was at their match yesterday to watch Tessmann in their promotion match. Thing needs to know is that both teams will be losing their managers, but there are some positives. They both need some midfielders to boost their depth for next season. But even more, Bologna will be playing the Champions League next season, and they both are consistently playing in the Serie A. For me, it's better to take Torino or Bologna than staying at Valencia, even if they get promoted to Serie A. He needs some stability. He doesn't need to fight. He go back down to Serie B and fight to get back into Serie A. He needs to prove himself in Serie A. There's a lot of hype building up around him in Italy, so he needs to move to one of these two teams. But for my personal preference, I want Bologna just because of the fact that his championship is only going to give him more matches and more competitive matches for him to partake in, improve himself. Also, the Daily Mail is reporting that Rokas, Pukštas, is being monitored by Arsenal, Aston Villa, and West Ham. If that is the case, it is only these three clubs that it comes down to for who he goes with in the summer, because apparently he will be moving this summer, but his club split will not let him go for cheap, and or I should say, was not cheap to Croatian clubs. So it'd be good money for him. I think someone said it was like 10 million euros, somewhere around that range. But even if it is one of these two teams, I want to see him go on loan. And it would be on loan to either an English Championship team, Eredivisie, or a Belgian club. In personal preference, I will say go to Aston Villa because traditionally they have less competitive rosters than West Ham and Arsenal. Based on tradition, he will get easier access in there. There's great things coming out of Aston Villa recently, yet and they are becoming more competitive. But even if he breaks into their club, he's definitely going to get looked at again by clubs like Arsenal or even Man U, whoever. So that would be the route if I was him to go. If it really did come down to these three teams. One final player, and now wrap up this episode is Favian Loyola, the Orlando homegrown player who plays for Orlando B. He was previously with the US U19 20 team back in March. Times I watch him, I know that there's a lot of hope in him from some people. I think he will be a good player one day. But when you compare him to guys like Neri, Figueroa, Downs, or even Sobrano, I don't think he is above them. I don't think he will pass them. But to go into the news with him is that he was called up to Chile's U20 team. Yes, he is eligible for both US and Chile. And I'm not all that familiar with Chile's youth team. I'm more aware of their senior team players because quite a bit of them play either here or in Europe. But I don't think he will crack into the US. Just looking at those players, like I mentioned, and others, there may be a better opportunity with him in Chile. I'm all for him going to the setting that call up to Chile's U20 team because if he breaks into their team, that's great for him. I mean, it's a reputable club. I mean, it'd be pretty cool to play for Chile. But part of the reason why I don't think he will make it through the US is because if you combine this season and last season, he's only had 6 goal contributions. For someone who plays as a striker and as a 10, that's not very good. And I know Mitch, what I said earlier about Sobrano, but he does do well for US at times that he has play. Neri is highly rated um, by a lot of people. He's probably one of our best youth strikers. Before he went to join Valencia's youth team, uh, from what I heard, is that he was highly rated at Atletico de Madrid. Even so much so that Simeone had him training with the first team, and that there was even possible discussion of him moving to uh, coming into play and towards the end of the season for Atletico de Madrid, but obviously that didn't happen because he decided to leave during the winter window to go to Valencia. Um, the individual that's closer to him, they were not. I'm the one that mentioned something to him about Neri going to Valencia, and he didn't know anything about it. So, can't really say why. I honestly completely forgot to even follow up on that. But, um, as someone who does like Atletico de Madrid, I was kind of hoping that he would break into the team. But, yeah, Figueroa, the same thing. He didn't have the best U17 World Cup, but he has performed for the U.S. and he is apparently highly rated with Liverpool. And yes, he did sign a professional um, contract with Liverpool, and apparently Jurgen Klopp really likes Figueroa. And if it wasn't for the injury, they were someone I talked to on Twitter who's a big Liverpool fan said that he was even being considered to uh, play towards the end of the season for Liverpool to make his debut. But I guess they decided not to do that because they didn't want to risk him getting re-injured when he just came back from injury. And I even saw a Liverpool article that even said that they were considering him. So if he does live up to the hype, these players are going to be above him. I mean, same thing with Downs. He's a lot of the clubs are watching Downs in Germany from, and when it comes to European leagues, I focus a lot on the Bundesliga. Um, so yeah, yeah, it's great on Fabian to get that call up to Chile. Hopefully, it works out for him. But it sucks. Yeah, it didn't work. It's not working out for him with the U.S., but it is what it is. Uh, if he stays with Chile, all the best to him. But yeah, I'll try to work on another episode later this week. We'll have to see what some of the news reports are coming together. I do plan to kind of do a position by position death poll of uh, that I think is kind of our death. Um, and that would kind of be like a blend of current performance and potential. Still kind of working on that. Still have a lot of busy stuff regarding like independent study and other things. Trying to spend time with family over the summer. Since this is really my uh, first full year, I get to spend around family after spending 5 years in the army, and it's gonna be like the first summer I can actually really enjoy going out and doing things. Um, so I'll try to get those out when I can. I'll try to do like a little mini series on that stuff. Um, uh, but thank you for joining today's episode. Hope to see you next time. Uh, Make sure if you like the episode to follow us on here. And you can also find us on Twitter if you haven't yet, underneath the same exact name.